Welcome to the IoTDay 2022. I'm excited to share my presentation, AI and Art, with you. My name is Aishatu, and I'm an AI artist, peace technologist, and I'm also a critical AI ethicist. Peace is my compass, so my main goal is to promote global peace. I've dedicated my whole life towards promoting peace in the world. In particular, I worked in West Africa, in Benin, Niger, Burkina Faso, and also currently working on a peace process in the Middle East. You can find me on the list of top 100 women in AI ethics, and I've demonstrated my ability to develop AI solutions to promote peace. The topic of this year's IoTDay is research. So what really influences me a lot is digital humanities. And there it is really important to define what is meant by that. Digital humanities, for me, means participating in the world while being attentive to technologies and their implications for human beings. That's a definition that I can assign to. There's so many different definitions out there. That's why I shared this link with you here in my presentation, where whenever you refresh the page, it gives you another definition. My main focus is really to look at exponential technologies. And these exponential technologies are those that enable change at a rapidly accelerating nonlinear pace. For instance, 3D printing, advanced analytics, blockchain, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, IoT, they're all exponential technologies. My recent research has been really focusing on the different iterations of the web. Web 1 being a more read-only version of the web, like in the beginning of the 90s. Then you have Web 2, where we're at currently with social media, people being increasingly connected. And then we have Web 3, which includes the metaverse, virtual reality, increased complex algorithms and smart machines. Also, I've been looking into digital humanities from Web 2 to Web 3, and also into how the different apps that we know, like the browsers, where we store our information, how we use video and audio calls, how that has changed now into decentralized systems. As I mentioned earlier, peace is my compass. It guides me, it gives me purpose, it gives meaning to what I'm trying to develop. So I want to give you a few examples of my peace technology that I've been working on, in particular AI for conflict prediction, AI for social justice, AI for language preservation, and AI for edutainment. When it comes to AI for language preservation, I've been looking into natural language processing, also known as NLP, and I've been looking into how we can use it to develop solutions that can help us preserve languages. And I was inspired while I was working as part of the Leading with Artificial Intelligence Lab participant. There was this guiding question called, how can artificial intelligence support us to better prepare for future transformational development? That was the guiding question. And there were so many different participants from all over the world trying to find case studies to answer that particular question. We had people from over 154 participants from 61 different countries and different age ranges. And it offered an opportunity and a platform for learning and co-creation. to engage change makers from civil society, private and public sector in a multi-stakeholder dialogue process. So I have focused on the question, how can we use AI for conflict prediction? And in particular, what if we could predict violent conflict between nomadic cattle herders and sedentary farmers in sub-Saharan Africa before they arise, and help stop them? That really interested me because I identified that conflict prevention is really key in making a difference in peace, justice, and in peace and justice. When we look at the Agenda 2030 and also the year 2030, there are predictions that say that over 70.8 million people will have fled their homes due to conflict and disaster. And over 74 million people currently are facing acute food insecurity. So you can only imagine by 2030 that this number will rise. So the goal really is to see how can we build peaceful, just, and inclusive societies. And that in order to do that, we need a commitment to prevent all forms of violence. So me being originally from Nigeria, and I wanted to look into how we could develop an Hausa NLP early warning conflict prevention system. And as I was part of the participants, I was looking into, how would we go about building such early warning tool? What would be necessary to develop something like this, and how it could be used to serve as a prioritization tool to determine hotspots for land conflicts and to direct targeted help to areas that need it the most. And as a peace technologist, what I want to do is really help build trust, collaboration, dialogue between governments, civil society, and communities. And so I decided that an early warning tool would be really appropriate for such an undertaking. Another tool I would like to share with you is AI for social justice. And here I was part in a hackathon, and me and my team, we developed an app against AI bias. This is another example of how hackathon can be a tool to develop really quickly ideas that can be used as real life applications. So we identified that in the US criminal justice system, there are algorithms in use that predict the likelihood of someone committing a crime in the future. So we thought, what would make the biggest difference? And that would be to work on the system, to develop something whereby judges would be presented with an algorithm that could show them the way a person should have been judged, and also look at information that shows that even those algorithms don't identify people by race, they use proxies. So as you might have noticed, language is a really important topic for me. So I like to quote Ngugi Thiong'o's Decolonizing the Mind, where he says, language carries culture, and culture carries, particularly through orature and literature, the entire body of values by which we come to perceive ourselves and our place in the world. And the reason why it is really important to use AI for language preservation is the fact that over 52 languages have died out already on the African continent. And at the moment, we have about 2,000 languages in 54 different countries. So to promote awareness around linguistic and cultural diversity is really important in order to promote AI-enabled machine translation for African languages. You probably ask yourself, why African NLP? because it would enable the translation between and into African languages. It would also help to revitalize, maintain, and preserve languages that exist. And also, it would create a meeting ground for languages to meet as material entities through algorithms. So using NLP to bridge the language gap is just one example of how powerful AI can be in bringing humans and computers closer together. Now I'd like to talk about AI for edutainment. In my research and in my work, I've also looked into how I could develop chatbots. I participated in a course that was organized by Cocoa Hub, a platform that uses and offers no-code NLP chatbot solutions. So as you can see here, as part of the course, we were asked to develop a use case for a chatbot. And my use case was to develop a chatbot that could help teach young people in West Africa that are affected by the conflict between nomadic cattle herders and farmers, to teach them about the Fulani tribe, their culture. So as you can see here, I built my chatbot using the Cocoa Hub Studio, and I've written down the whole script. I came up with the identity of the chatbot, and I called my game Fuller. Fuller is a game that I really like. It's going to be available on Alexa soon. It's a serious game voice skill that I developed with the Cocoa Hub platform. And we had a bot of competition where I was one of the winners, so I was really excited. It's an immersive educational serious game about the Fulani people. And it's very engaging, very interesting approach to experiment how we can use chatbots for education and how we can combine education and entertainment, which means edutainment, to reach more people. So what really guides my research is also post-colonial theory. And the field of post-colonial studies was influenced by Edward Said's path-breaking book, Orientalism. And it is something that focuses really on, what is knowledge? What is the relationship between knowledge and power? And here I would like to share this example because it shows often that what we develop, the inventions, often favor their creators. So this is a very famous example of the soap dispenser that has been developed in a way that it doesn't actually recognize darker skin tones. So you see on the far left, that person was able to receive soap easily. In the middle, the person with the darker skin, it didn't work. And in the right-hand side, you can see the dark-skinned person using a white piece of paper, and it worked then for that person. So I focus my research really on, how can we build better AI systems that can serve all communities? And how can we design AI in a post-colonial world? And here, what I often refer to is we have to do a shift from egocentric to ecocentric, because apart from just developing AI solutions that are good for all human beings in the world, we need to also do a paradigm shift towards an environmentally friendly approach to designing AI solutions. So a lot of my work, my research has been focused on demystifying AI, showing how we can use it to serve underrepresented communities, how we can use it to for justice, for peace. And here I was really looking more into how can we make this knowledge about AI or knowledge in general more accessible for the general public. So I focused on how we can use art as a medium to represent knowledge about the world, and to look into how artists can contribute to a collective search for truth. So here I would like to share with you one of my artworks. It's called African Epistemology. And it really inspired me to create this piece when I was thinking about what I mentioned before, the interconnectedness of humans with the non-human world. And also to show that when we talk about AI ethics, we need to ask ourselves the question, whose ethics are we actually talking about, right? And what would an AI ethics from an African perspective look like? And I'm very inspired by so many different African philosophies that exist out there. One that is well known now is the one about connecting AI with Ubuntu philosophy, the idea that we are all interconnected, that I am because we are, unlike the Cartesian cogito ergo sum, whereby I think, therefore I am. The focus is on existing because of being a thinking being, rather than focusing on how we exist in relation to the outside world and others. And yeah, I'm really, really inspired by African futurism, Afrofuturism, because when I was reading a lot of books, I realized, science fiction books and fantasy books, that there aren't many BIPOC communities represented as main protagonists, right? Basically, it made me start to think, you know, how can we imagine a future if even in science fiction books, they are not depicted, BIPOC communities are not depicted as being part of a futuristic utopia or dystopia. So when I discovered literature of African futurism, Afrofuturism, like N.K. Jamison's Fifth Season, or An Unkindness of Ghosts, I started to discover that there's this whole new world trying to depict a future whereby BIPOC communities are creating a future that is alternative. So this is something that inspired me to create the exhibition, Quantum Visions of African Futurism. It's basically a 4-piece collection that I showcased during the Mozilla Festival 2022. As you can see, it was showcased in a VR gallery, and I will tell you more about it in a moment. Before I go into that, I wanted to talk about one of the art pieces. It's called Misclassified Bride. And this is a very good example of how I'm using my art as a medium to spark reflection. So if you look at this beautiful artwork, it actually, the way I develop it, I use digital illustration techniques, and I use deep learning techniques to embellish my art. So my artworks are all created in collaboration with AI. And when I developed this piece, I wanted people to reflect on computer vision algorithms. And I asked people the question, you know, how would AI classify, perceive, recognize this woman? Would it recognize her as a bride? Would it see her, or would it misclassify her as solely being people, plural? As you know, there has been research into this showing that a bride coming from India or from an African continent wearing traditional attire would not actually be recognized because the AI was trained with white wedding dresses and would only recognize such as being clothes for brides. So whenever I create my artworks, I add a caption that is meant to be educational, which asks a question, and I try to use art as a medium to make these kind of topics much more accessible to people, because not everyone will be reading journal articles. Often these journal articles are more for the research community, but this kind of information needs to be made accessible to everyone. And when I showed my art pieces like Misclassified Bride, or I did another one about the environmental impact of AI solutions, people were surprised. They didn't imagine that this ethical implication was happening. So, you know, people feel attracted to artworks. And then when they start to read the title or the caption, or they interact with the artist who gives them a more deeper explanation as to why that piece was created, I think it's a different kind of way to engage, to start a debate with everyone being capable to discuss it. Quantum Visions of African Futurism. It's an exhibition I created for the Mozilla Festival 2022. And if you've registered, check it out. You can see it till the end of June. And it explores how speculative narratives of Black imaginations can be read as allegories of living with data and artificial intelligence. And the art pieces that were shown on that exhibition are in conversation with African Futurism, a term coined by writer Nnedi Okorafor to examine deeper meanings in the various elements that compose the artworks. By combining deep learning techniques, digital art, and photography, the artworks prioritize the experiences, needs, and subjectivities of African communities on the continent and of its diaspora. So these artworks tell visual stories to inspire reflection. What if patterns of exclusion and erasure and algorithmic systems were no longer recapitulating and magnifying a history of discrimination and erasure in the field of AI, as well as in society at large? What if AI was rooted in local knowledge systems rather than the Cartesian model? So basically, my art tried to examine different AI ethical issues. And by doing so, I was trying to really guide the visitor into exploring the intersections of art, AI, and African philosophies, and how they can create desirable futures in a post-colonial world that foster equity and raise awareness about problems related to algorithmic discrimination and erasure. And through the medium of art and artificial intelligence, visitors were inspired to reflect on ethical issues, especially, how can we use AI for good? How can we learn and discuss AI ethics through art? And how can we use AI to raise awareness of intersectional issues that collide with race, class, gender, ability, and citizenship? To conclude this presentation, I invite you to explore my art. You can find it on my website, aishatuado.com. And you can follow me on Twitter as I continue to raise these issues, or other social media platforms. And I invite you to think of AI art as a new medium for research, as a new way to make research accessible to everyone. Because who is not able to interpret an image and discuss it? A journal article sometimes might be talking in a language that is more tailored towards the research community, but we need to make these issues accessible to the wider public. And to do so, I've developed my own metaverse gallery. Inspired by vernacular design of the Hausa Kingdom. So when you go to my metaverse gallery, all my artworks are there. You will be transformed. You will experience art in its environment that is surrounded by cultural references to architectural marvels of the Hausa Kingdom. So I used it also to preserve the architecture of the Hausa people in the metaverse. And this is also another of my most current research to look into how we can use the metaverse to preserve culture. And how can we prepare for Web 4, which is the combination of virtual reality, IoT, and AI and blockchain. Thank you for your attention.